Okay, welcome again to another Visual Insights for the new members. I appreciate you guys coming. For the ones who've been here, thanks for coming back again. Give you a little background of myself. My name is Ryan Harrison. I've been training visual performance skills for the last 20 years now. I've been working with pro baseball, college softball, pro football players, NHL, tennis players, race car drivers, shooters. You name the sport, we look at the visual aspect and how that applies to their sport, and we have a method that we use to work with those guys. Today we have Don Wakamatsu, who's the bench coach of the Texas Rangers. Don and I go back really for the beginning of time for me, starting
20-something years.
Yeah, 20 years ago. And part of this, and I failed to mention, is I learned everything I learned from is my dad, Dr. Bill, who started in 1971 with the Kansas City Royals. And luckily enough, he wanted me to work with him 20 years ago, and I got to be, the pup going around and seeing all this stuff, and got to work with the Angels when Wak was with the Angels and got to know him there and over time. And Wak's a guy, I'll let him explain himself a little bit of his jobs, but he's had about every role in baseball, from player at Arizona State to a minor league player to a manager in the minor leagues to a coach and a scout and everything. So, Don, welcome to the show, and maybe give everyone a little background about yourself.
Well, Ryan, thank you. It's a pleasure. And again, we go way, way back, and I had ultimate respect for your father, and we had such a great relationship. So my background, as you mentioned, started off getting a scholarship, played Arizona State, played there with Barry Bonds, Odom Dow. We went a couple of years to the College World Series, never won it, but great program and a great learning, stepping stone for me going into pro baseball. Played about 11 and a half years of pro baseball, mostly in the minor leagues. Played 1 year in the big leagues with the Chicago White Sox. Again, around some tremendous players, Bo Jackson and Robin Ventura, Frank Thomas, all those guys, Jack McDowell. And then went on, took my first coaching job. Really, I guess before I took a coaching job, I was a player coach for the Seattle Mariners system, back with Raul Ibanez and Ryan Franklin and those guys. Alex Rodriguez was there at the time. And then went on, I've been with 15 teams as a player and a coach. Not too many guys have been kind of a rolling stone in baseball.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah. And so, no, I look at it because I guess they call it the Rolodex or the database. I got a lot of friends in the game and been real fortunate to be around a lot of brilliant minds. Let's see. I think as a coach, I've been with Arizona Diamondbacks. Did some work with both running the minor league system for the Anaheim Angels, managed the Seattle Mariners, was an assistant scout to Brian Cashman with the Yankees, did some international stuff over there. Spent 4 years, 2 of those with Kansas City and playing in the World Series and winning one of them there. Won a World Series with Anaheim. And then this is my second tour of duty back with the Texas Rangers. And I can't remember everything running together now, either my 8th or 9th year, but we're going to open a brand new $1 billion stadium here in Texas. So it'll be exciting once we get baseball back.
So when are you writing the book with all your experience there?
Yeah, I don't know.
That might be an encyclopedia of
no, it's been phenomenal. It really has. And like I said, from Buck Showalter to Mike Scioscia to Joe Madden to Bobby Guerin in Oakland to Johnny Farrell to just a lot of guys that I've been fortunate to have relationships with, along with all the players. And so I don't take any of it for granted, and just feel like I've been real fortunate to be able to God allowed me to kind of go down this path.
Yeah, well, it was a pleasure. Obviously, I think it was maybe 2000. What it might have been with the Angels.
Yeah.
I first met you, and obviously through 2002 when they won the World Series at that time. And obviously times have changed since then, and you coming up, and now today with you got the new stadium that's probably phenomenal technology inside there. And we were just talking prior to this, is all the people that are involved too. But at the same time, your experiences in this game is amazing to be able to see what great players there are out there. And you probably, maybe have an idea or a thought process here of, what gets guys, what are some of the reasons why some of these guys make it? That's the $1 billion answer we all want. So I know that's not a real simple answer, but you see some common themes for guys who are consistent and stay within the game.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, and again, I've been able to be around so many different players, both American and foreign players, whether they're from Korea or Dominican or Taiwan or Japan. But to answer that question, I think running the minor league system for the Anaheim Angels, for me, it was really interesting because we would have, and they're starting to cut back, but you look at minor league systems, there might be 170, 190 players in a minor league system. Yeah. And I could literally go and count on one hand how many players really, really, truly love to play the game, And so I think when you watch a Francisco Lindor with Cleveland and he's high-fiving the bat boys going down the line before the game starts, it's just such a genuine – there's no other place on the planet that these guys want to be. They were born to play baseball. That's number one. And you'll go through years in your career where you love it a little bit more and you don't. But we were talking earlier about the ability for players to process negativity. That's such a, I played with Barry Bonds.
Yeah.
Right? And somebody that to this day still is a friend of mine, but amazes me how it didn't matter. He never lost confidence that he was the best player on the game. Granted, he had such great tools, and maybe I would have felt that way if I had his tools. Right? That's another great thing, the ability to get back up. And I think the other thing is understanding that it's not a free lunch. These guys that have great careers, no matter how much they make it look easy, they work their tail off. Most of you guys don't know what, we used to get the sunflower seeds in these great big buckets. Not the little 5-gallon buckets, but these great big ones. They probably hold 150 baseballs. Adrian Beltre, who I managed in Seattle and had here in Texas, and is a good friend of mine, he would take 5 of those a day in spring training. He's a 6-time Gold Glover, right? Ichiro was hitting 1,000 baseballs a day in high school, and then continued throughout the time I was around him. He never took a day off, So these guys are so dedicated to their craft that it's not just going out on a weekend, or a lot of the guys will say, I want to spend so much time in the gym, but they have to be well-rounded players. They have to understand the game and all that. So.
Yeah, and like I said, it's amazing the players you've been around, and even I forgot about the Barry Bonds all the way back in college on there. Yeah. And I have a video of my dad and Barry back when he was a Hawaiian Islander with the Pittsburgh Pirates on there.
He wasn't there long though.
Yeah, it wasn't. Well, it's funny. I told the story the other day, but Sid Thrift, and who Sid Thrift is. Wanted to know my dad's opinion on Barry's eyes, and he's like, he's got the best. He's got phenomenal vision, but it wasn't just this phenomenal vision of clarity. He had phenomenal depth perception and binocularity, but his phenomenal understanding of how to see things, his visualization, but yet he wanted to learn more. He wasn't satisfied, even though, it's funny you say it, because I remember my dad telling me the story, is Barry thought he had phenomenal eyes, which he did. But, why do I need to do more? I'm great. But he did. He wanted to learn more and get better at it. And he did tell Sid that he would have broken the home run record a lot earlier if Sid had called him up earlier.
Yeah. I'll tell you a quick story about Barry. We played together, and we both got drafted in '85. He went a little higher than I did, but so I've seen him since '85, and I think it's 6 years later, right? And I know he's already had 5 years in the big leagues and all the accolades, and I finally get there as a minor league, free agent, 6-year free agent to big league camp, and I walk up to him and he said, "What took you so long?" So, it's just easy for some guys.
Yeah. Now, as a player back in college, you know, you see some of those phenomenal talents out of him back then?
Yeah. Yeah. No, we had some legendary, and ASU was one of the top programs in the country, and we had
Mhm.
some dog fights with Miami and Oklahoma State. I think we played a 5-hour game in the College World Series. But no, there's Barry was, obviously just a wiry young kid at that time, but the confidence level and his ability to do some things, again, make it look easy, but he had such lightning hands and hand-eye coordination, like you said, the vision and everything else. It was a slower game for him.
Yeah, and that's not the only answer for him, but he had some great vision. And I think, when you look at some of these great players that are consistent over time, a lot of them have really good vision plans. And we kind of talked about this in another webinar, but what are some of the visual plans maybe that you see, or do you see guys have a good visual plan when they, is that their consistency? Any secret there?
Well, I thought about this when you asked me to come on the show, and I've been around Edgar Martinez and I've been around George Brett, right? And those are guys that, from a physical standpoint, didn't have very good eyesight.
Yeah.
So they made adjustments in their swing, or in the case of Edgar, like George was an upright hitter, and then Charlie Lau kind of got him to lean over a little bit, and he just saw the ball from a much better position, right? So physically, he changed his body style or setup. Where Edgar, Edgar was one of the first guys I've ever been around that didn't swing a bat, just tracked visually for like a week. It's like the funniest thing you ever saw, that stand in for BP and never swing a bat.
Yeah.
Plus he did a lot of the training that you guys talk about with the ball training and just everything. He just knew he didn't have very good eyesight.
Yeah, he had actually what we call exophoria, where he saw things a little differently.
Yeah, and so a lot of people think that vision training's new, but like you said, we've done it. We've been doing it for years, and way back when I was a player in the Dodgers system, we used to play the pong game, to try to hand-eye coordination and visual acuity, that kind of stuff. But when we first got involved together, we took, I don't know if you remember with your dad, we took, I think, 20 players, our top 20 prospects in the Angels minor league system, and put them through an extensive program with you guys. Mm-hmm. Well, that was, like you said, 2000. Well, then you start looking at Lackey and K-Rod, and you look at that whole group that went up, unheard of, that helped them win a World Series. Sean Piggins.
I have video of Lackey, and not video, audio, and I think you might have been in the room, of Lackey and my dad talking about the visual focus and visualizing being in the World Series. You can be there this year, and he ended up being in the World Series.
Yeah. Winning, I don't know what he won. He won 2 games in the World Series.
Yeah.
K-Rod, I think, won 5. So it was, in the playoffs. So, but no, I think it's a great conversation, because you got to check the boxes, right? You got to understand how your body works. You got to understand how your mind works. You got to understand how your eyes work.
Yeah, it's a great statement there.
Right, and the deficiencies or the strengths, and knowing yourself. And I think we do that as much as we can now before we start. There's so much out there now as far as mechanical adjustments or philosophies and scap load and launch angles and all this. But if you can't see the baseball, and you can't, and I call vision, mental vision and physical vision, right? So are you looking, do you train enough to be able to say, am I seeing what I'm, looking at? And there's so much in our game where, the mind gets in the way. And so I do think, I wouldn't be on this show if I didn't think, I wasn't such an advocate for both visual training and mental training. Especially at our level. Yeah. Well,
but I know your beliefs too. And
yeah.
And you're right. There are all important. The physical side's important, and my bias, I think, a little bit is we tend to go from results to the beginning. Like we're worried about the mechanics instead of understanding what's causing some of that. Maybe not position, but maybe mentally they're messed up. Because something's going on at home or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
And then mentally are they really seeing it? So if we can kind of go, hey, what's the first thing that needs to be done? Is we got to see the ball to react. And then is our mindset ready to see that ball? And then are we ready in a position to swing at it?
Yeah. Well, you asked me the question earlier about what makes great players, and routines make great players, right? Mikey Young, I remember Mikey Young with Texas. He started the year in the month of April hitting 130. He won the batting title that year. Never went out and took more batting practice or anything, but his routine was so regimented, and he didn't go, you know what? And it's really funny because when guys struggle in baseball, the first thing that human nature tells them to go out and work on it. Mm-hmm. Well, when you're hitting and you're in a slump, most of the time your swing's not in a good shape, so you're practicing a bad swing. So that's why the importance of having such a disciplined routine, and whether it's vision training, but we do what we call temperature check. And that's when guys come to the ballpark, I got to know what kind of mood is this guy in today, right? I'm not just going to start coaching or saying something without checking his temperature. He might be, might have had some off-field stuff, family stuff. Somebody guy might have got sick, who knows? So we check that in a sense. We kind of find out how they're doing. And then at that point, then we'll start talking about, let's get into the routine, and whether it's a lot of times, whether it's mental or visual, it'll kind of take their mind away from that.
You're going to have to come up with a new name, though, because we're going to have to do temperature checks just to find a temperature.
yeah, we got a bunch coming, that's for sure.
Yeah, exactly. But, you're absolutely right. And I think, that's one thing I feel like I learned from my dad really well is there's a time to talk and a time to listen. And, players, they may not be open to learning or understanding something. They got to be in the right mindset to be ready for it. And sometimes when they think they're ready for it, they're really not ready for it. You got to let them burn off that anxiety before they're ready to understand really what's going on.
No doubt. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I've coached the coaches, and so I've been fortunate. Now I'm at that position where I'm a little bit more of a mentorship for some of the younger guys. Talked about doing a minor league managers call the other day, but for any coaches on this call, I'll tell you a story. I went from the third base coach in in Texas to the bench coach in Oakland. And we had a third baseman by the name of Eric Chavez, again, a 6-time Gold Glover, tremendous player. And Chavi.
He played with my brother, actually.
Yeah. And so I asked Chavi, I said, who was the best infield instructor you ever had? And he said, Ron Washington. I said, really? What did he teach you? And he couldn't tell me. So the point of that story is, and anybody that knows Wash is a real energetic, positive guy that gets guys to believe in themselves. I to this day, I don't think he's the best infield instructor, but I do think he's a great motivator.
Yeah.
Right. So you want to be able to balance, especially now with the amount of YouTube videos and online lessons that guys are scouring and trying to decipher what's the right mechanical side of it. It's important. It's important to go out and learn the physics and the mechanics of things. But on the flip side, I've met as many good coaches that really are getting guys to feel good about themselves, right? To feel confident, to pick them up when they're down and keep them motivated that way. So the good ones that I've hired as minor league coaches, those are guys that can do both. They have to be able to have relational skills.
You bring up two huge important things that I hope people take away. That one is routine, and the other is confidence. And, that's one of the things I feel like I try to explain to people is, look, everyone's got different vision, different needs, and different, tasks that we want to do. We may trick some things. We may choose some things. We might go different. But what my real goal is to give them visual confidence. Is if they can have visual confidence, then hopefully that other confidence comes in. And, when a player's got confidence, especially maybe as a bench manager, you look at another guy on another team that's got visual confidence, like Bonds, you're like, I don't know what to do.
We're walking him. I'm going to do the Buck Showalter walking with the bases loaded.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, by the way, you brought up Ronald Washington, and you may know this, may not, but he was part of the Royals Baseball Academy. He was one of the guys that my dad was involved with, and Sid Thrift, and Jack McKeon, and back in those early days. So it's for my dad, it was fun to watch all his progression of where he's at today, and pretty neat.
Keeping that legacy alive, brother.
Yeah. Well, that was obviously a time, you talk about vision, but they were doing stuff, stretching and weightlifting back in the 70s before it was, really done. And vision was actually done prior to that. I know the Cincinnati Reds were doing stuff, but it's not really new today. It's just there's more publicity, there's more YouTube and more Instagram and Twitter talk about things.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't know that story, or at least the story that I understand was at that time they were trying to get the best athletes, the track guys, even if they never played, and brought them in and tried to teach them to baseball, and a couple of them end up being really good players. Yeah,
it was pretty successful program. Considering what they were doing when they were doing it.
Yeah.
Now, in today's game, there's a little bit, we got people not playing today because they can't get on a field. And, you also have the showcase situations of people doing only showcases on there. And, I know this is a little bit broad, but from a development standpoint, what are some thoughts that you might have that this is a time that they could, get a lot out of a little when they can't get out in the field or in a cage?
Well, I think that's a pretty broad question too. But understand and going back, whatever level you're at, to assess your strengths and weaknesses, truly assess and listen to the people that have seen you play, right? And a lot of players are not real good self-evaluators, meaning that, or they just want to work on their strengths. So now's the time we do so much testing, physical testing on mobility, on strength, on all those things. So when times like this happen, it gives us an opportunity to say, okay, I need to do some yoga, or you know what, my rotor cuff is really weak, or my sprint speed, or the strength in my feet aren't good, my vision training, my mental training, and my reading. It's the other thing that's really amazing. No matter, in my opinion, no matter what field you're in, successful people manage time, right? And I remember listening to Arnold Schwarzenegger give a talk one time, and he said, "Listen, you can go to work 8 hours for 8 hours a day. Think about how much time that's left over in the day, and I think that's what happens a lot of times, especially in the big leagues, where we have such great amenities. The guys are getting there early and earlier every year, but they're not utilizing their time as good. You have time. It's just what you prioritize to give it to. So, to me, we're having Zoom calls, as I mentioned, 4 days a week on how are we keeping our players healthy? How are we keeping them ready when we don't know when we're going to start? They're talking about pretty soon. So now we're starting to crank it up. Are their legs in shape to be able to go out a week from now and start sprinting without pulling anything? Are they flexible enough? Is there explosive speed? Is their arm in shape? All those things are all critical elements to what you're, especially in the winter right now. Or in the downtime.
And the challenge is, is what if it doesn't start for another month and you get them too early, too soon?
Well, we've had that.
This is strange times.
We've been going with some of our players. They haven't missed a beat. They're throwing live to, maybe their cousins or something. They're doing whatever. You've seen Joey Gallo is doing. He's got a net set up in his high-rise apartment. I don't know.
I saw that.
He's going through there. It's going to go halfway across Dallas. So, no, guys are being really creative right now. But I do challenge guys to continue to educate themselves on every part of the game.
Yeah, I think it is a great opportunity for all kids and coaches too. I was having a conversation with a college coach earlier today that, even though you want to be on the field, because believe me, I want to be in my gym right now too, working with some players. But it's a great time to kind of sit back and kind of learn and look at things and maybe, you kind of mentioned this earlier, synthesize what works for you, what doesn't work for you, not just watch a video and go, okay, that's me, I got to change this on there.
Yeah. No, the kind of going back to what you were talking about before with some of these younger players and what I've seen in the last, say, 10 years, and including my son, right, where there's so much teaching, so much. You look at these facilities that are out there now, whether it's Driveline or whether it's Texas Baseball Ranch, which are really good places, right? But you're almost creating these indoor players. So whether they're out there, they're throwing on a radar gun, and we're pitch designing through Rapsodo or K-Vest or you name it. The one element is that the guys that play here at the big league level really know how to compete and how to switch over from that. Yeah. So I think all that stuff's important. I actually, this will be my 36th year in professional baseball. I did the circuit this winter. I went down to Texas Baseball Ranch to listen to a lot of young, innovative minds speak. I went out to Pitchapalooza in Nashville and listened to a bunch of guys talk. I listen to stuff that's coming out of Driveline, because those guys now it's almost like a university where they're getting people to go to that facility where maybe because of, in professional baseball, we're segregated by 30 teams. So, that information isn't shared where they're actually sharing that information. So I like it, and, but we talked about this earlier, it's always about your return on your investment. I can look at something and say, that's a phenomenal idea. Now I got to look at it, and does it apply to a major league player? And can he compete with that? Yeah. Or is it just a training tool to allow him to do a little bit better job on this? So, but my biggest, I think what I'm trying to say more than anything is in the winter, is there things that you can do to compete? It might be a video game. Yeah. It might be, it might be golf by yourself out there, whatever it is. But, we're getting ready to start here, and we got to compete,
Well, that's a perfect example is, the Michael Jordan series.
No doubt.
Showing how he competes, and, Tiger Woods and even Phil Mickelson. I was listening to a Phil Mickelson thing the other day, and he was talking about the question that was asked to him is, there's a lot of good golfers out there. Why do you make it and they don't? And he said it was the willing to compete. And his example was that he had a task to make 100 straight putts, and it took him for a long time to do it. And he even got to 99 and missed that 100th and started over and did it again. He says the other guys, they stop at 55 and say, I'm done. I'm good on there. They don't put that competitive edge. So I'm not saying you got to hit 100 to do it, but it's really about, for me, I look at it as quality versus quantity. So, if they're doing a bunch of quantity, but they're not getting anywhere, it doesn't matter. We got to get good quality, and that's part of the competitive side is addition to that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some guys have phenomenal routines and do things. Ichiro used to, he'd flip up his mattress in a 5-star hotel and take BP inside his suite. So, what are you willing to do, to be great? And I think that's the thing. I just read a book on David Goggins. A lot of people on here probably seen it, but it's called You Can't Hurt Me. Read that book. You want to talk about a special human being, went through Bud's training 3 times, had run 100-mile races in 24 hours, did 3 in 1 week, did 4,000 pull-ups in 24 hours.
Broken foot, I believe, too.
Broken foot. So, but there's interesting things he talks about. He said the human mind wants to quit, at about 40% of the body's capacity. Yeah. So what are you doing, and how bad do you want it? And do you want to be great? And do you subscribe when people say, well, no, you're too short, you're too small, you're not fast enough? They come in all shapes and sizes in our game.
Yeah. If you look behind me and the stuff out there, there's some digital stuff. There's the Max BP pitching machine in there, and, things on the wall. All those things that we do from a vision standpoint, we compete. Yeah. And it's really about competing with visual accuracy, visual processing, visual reaction skills. And, that's where even like the high-speed wiffle ball machine is, how many can you track? How many can you barrel up? And it's cool because, and you've seen some players, I know a lot of your players use it, because I know Calix uses it with the players, and Hunter Pence had a video the other day hitting off the machine on there, but it gives them that competitiveness. Like, this thing's not going to beat me. I'm going to figure out a way to take a small object, high velocity, small bat, and friggin' hit the heck out of it.
Well, there's no one greater than Hunter Pence, I'll tell you that. I mean, he's a competitor deluxe, you know, and it was a great story. Anybody go, if you get a chance, go on YouTube. I think it's out there somewhere where he went to the Dominican last year prior to the season. I mean, San Francisco gave up on him. Here's a guy that probably had as much money in the bank as anybody needed, yet he still had the desire to play. And so he goes down there at, I don't know what Hunter is, 34, 35, goes to the Dominican and competes down there. You see him being a great teammate, comes back and makes the All-Star team. So, you know, and he is, like you said, he devoured that wiffle ball machine because he knew he had to keep his reflexes a little bit sharper than everybody else. But just I can't say enough great things about Hunter.
Yeah, you know, that's been the fun thing about pro baseball, you know, is, you know, a lot of people say, oh, you get to work with these guys. You know, it's fun just to see their personalities and the way they go about things. And they go about things in a different way. And I think, you know, it's not always about the talent, you know, because you've seen some talented guys never make it, but it's those guys who can compete at a high level under stress, under fatigue, under pressure, under tension, and do it day in and day out and consistently.
Well, it's amazing that, you know, people watch these guys play and they're, you know, they're tigers on the field. I mean, they're ferocious on the field, and yet some of them, most of the good ones, are as humble as you'll ever come across.
Yeah.
You know, I remember people go, where was one of your favorite places to play or be as a coach, and why? And I spent that 1 year as a bench coach for Joe Girardi in spring training in Tampa for the Yankees because Tony Pena was doing the WBC. That was the year I scouted for him. And to be around Andy Pettit, to be around Jeter, to be around Jorge Posada, who was a guest coach that year, but he just done playing. But all those great players in a franchise that's won 27, 20, I don't know what it is, 27, 28 World Series, and be arguably one of the most humble places I've ever been. You know, it was magical, you know. And so I think there's got to be a side that you have to be confident. You have to have the work ethic. You have to have that desire to continue to learn. And above all, you have to have humility. So
now I'm going to maybe put you on the spot here a little bit, but you are a catcher. You coach catching. You've been around. Why do we have why do so many great managers or coaches tend to be catchers? And they're not all, but a majority of them tend to be catchers.
a couple of reasons, I think. Number one is, you know, you see the field differently your whole career. You know, you get to watch what a first baseman does, a second baseman does, shortstop, third, outfield positioning. And then I think the second part of that is, you know, you're dealing with 12, 13, now it's more, but pitchers that all have different personalities. And you have to be able to manage them all as a catcher. And I think that's a great stepping stone for a leadership role. And to be able to manage. So the game's a little bit slower. You know, I've done a lot of experiments through the years, and one of them was I was managing in Erie, Pennsylvania, and we'd really struggled. We had a lot of guys that didn't know the game, and so I made them manage one day. So if a player had an off day coming up, we would bring them in. They come in at 10 o'clock in the morning. We'd go over all the scouting report just like they would. I'd show them what a game report, and people that are on this call that don't understand a game report is that a minor league manager has to write basically a review and an action report of what happened every game. And that goes to the front office and goes to the scouts. Anyway, most players, and I never did as a player, had ever seen a game report. So now, and again, I had the approval of Bill Stoneman, who was our general manager with the Angels, of saying, we need to teach these guys, we need to educate these guys a little bit more. So they had the right, they would stand behind the cage, watch batting practice. They'd watch everybody practice. The game would start, and I'd sit next to them and talk about every scenario that was going to come up in that game. And we talked about the bullpen usage prior to the game, and they had the right to take a player out of the game, you know? And so at the end of the day, they would write up the report. We'd send it in the next day when we came in and set up maybe a 2 o'clock meeting. they had to stand up as a manager and talk about the game and talk about the effort level and talk about everything they saw from a perspective. And if they won, we gave them a lineup card. And if they lost, they had to go back in line. But, that's kind of the thing. Unless you put guys in that situation, we would put guys, players as third base coaches or first base coaches, especially third, to understand the decision-making process and how difficult it is to coach third base. One of the hardest coaching positions in the big leagues.
Yeah.
You won't realize how fast that game is, how good the outfield arms are, the shortstops aren't on relays, the surfaces, the elements, all those things, how difficult it is. But yet, if they're never in that position, how do they know what that's like? So we try to do as much of that as possible.
Yeah. It brings back something, that we talked about a little bit earlier, but is the ability to visualize is huge for those managers, for those coaches. And I think catchers tend to understand the visualization process because they're constantly picturing who's out in the field, what's the situation, what am I going to call? And you had a manager that you worked for was what I just went blank. I can't believe I went blank. The Angels manager. Not Tony.
Ron Renicky?
No, Angels manager. Sosha.
Yeah.
Mike Sosha. Now, when Sosha was with the Dodgers, my dad worked with him, and one of the things that the exercises they did in visualizing was he had to replay every pitch after every inning. And I remember that was a big deal with those Angel catchers, but that was a great exercise for those guys to learn the game and learn how to call games and probably learn how to manage.
Yeah, I was part of that with Soch, and so I actually created a form that I would sit in the dugout, and if Jeff Mathis or Mike Napoli or whoever it was in spring training, and they didn't do it as much during the year, but definitely for the 6 weeks of spring training, they'd come into the dugout, and I'd go sit next to them, and then, give me every pitch of every hitter in the sequence and what happened to it. And they got pretty good at it. Again, it was just – but you hear guys like Mike Young talks about it all the time. You can't afford to take a pitch off in this game, whether it's defense, whether it's hitting, or even when, he talks a lot about, you just made the last out of the last inning and you're over there and last thing you want to do is think about anything. And you know what? You just lost 15 pitches that inning. Now all of a sudden this guy's starting to break out a slider. You didn't see it because you weren't paying attention over there. Charlie Blackmon, you watch his on deck routine, the best in baseball. He gets out of the dugout, he puts his helmet on, and that first step, he never takes his eye off that pitcher the whole time. I mean, it's incredible. And so, pre-pitch routines, on deck circle routines, and it's amazing if you just stop and watch these guys and watch their routines, and you pick up so much from these guys and understand why they're great players.
Yeah. What is there? I mean, you bring up a bunch of guys. Is there anyone that stands out as maybe the best routine?
Well, no one was crazier in a sense than Ichiro, because he basically ate the same thing. I talk about Wade Boggs eating chicken for 18 years of his career, but Ichiro would try to get there within a minute in his parking spot at Safeco, right? He'd go right away to his locker. He had his pregame massage routine, but he would hit. If you think about Ichiro, he'd get there early, he'd hit one time. Then he'd go out for batting practice and he'd hit again. And then he had a pregame short routine again before the game started. Then he hit in the game. So he hit 4 times. And I don't it's not always about, like you said, it's not always about quantity, but his routines were so regimented. I remember working with Mark Teixeira when we had it here in Texas in the winter one time, and he had a small tee, and he was a switch hitter, and he'd get to the cage in the winter, and he'd set it up, and he'd try to hit 50 balls from the left side to the back of the cage with his small tee, and then he'd go the other side, and he'd go 50 balls to the back of the cage, not 51, not 49, 50. And I asked him what he was doing, and he said, listen, that's where I'm going to make my money off those closers. So he worked on the low tee, but it was just, and it's funny because we can go on and on about batting practice routine, but the point you start understanding that how you take batting practice does not is not a direct reflection of how you're going to play in the game. So what is batting practice for? A couple of things that guys don't do right is they're not ready to hit that first round. You know, you have all the time. Now we have all these elaborate equipment rooms and all that. You got to be ready physically and mentally when you get in there to bunt a bunt, to take that first swing if it's a hit and run. Don't waste that opportunity. I see too many guys, they're still stretching and they're wasting those good quality at bats because they didn't take the time to get locked in.
Yeah.
You know, the second part of that is you got to get your speed, your bat speed up to game speed. It's really interesting. I was up in Toronto and I was around Eddie Encarnacion and Batista, and I saw both those guys in back-to-back years hit 50 home runs. You know, anybody that watches that on a daily basis, it's absolutely amazing to hit 50 home runs. And again, Barry and Mark McGuire and these guys hit more and all that, but 50 home runs is special, right? But those guys, what they did on a more consistent basis than I ever saw anybody was they trained bat speed. They got their bat speed. So you think about it, if you're facing a coach BP and I throw BP and I'm out there throwing 62, 63 miles an hour at a short distance, and then they go and maybe before the game they'll take some soft toss, they'll loosen up again. They might hit off a machine, but they're going at maybe at 75%, right? And then they get in the game and they're facing Chapman throwing 103, and all of a sudden their body reacts and pulls out and their barrel's dragging. They're going, oh, what's wrong here? Well, you have to get whether it's sprint speed, whether it's arm speed, or whether it's bat speed, you have to get those ready to play in a game.
Yeah, I think, you know, from my side also is getting those eyes ready. And kind of what you're saying is, you know, a lot of those guys have mindless at-bats or warm-ups compared to a mindful attack. And, you know, I see guys, you know, even back when we were with Toronto too and different organizations, they just go up there and swing. And they're not even really taking in their early recognition. They're not tracking the ball. They're just lazily out there swinging. And the best, you know, even Chase Utley. I remember when I was with the Phillies, he'd come down on a rehab assignment and watching his routine of going into the cage with intent and and he never looked where a ball went. He just worked on seeing it to contact, crushing it, and never worried about where that thing went, because that's, in a sense, that's the controllable. If you can't control where the ball lands, you can't control where if a guy from wherever runs it down and catches it. So he's worried about that barrel connection. I don't think people worry about that enough today.
No, did you hear? They said Chase Utley ordered 28-inch bats when he was with Philly because they thought they might be facing the Yankees and Mariano Rivera throwing that cutter. So he wasn't going to get sawed off, so he ordered 28-inch bats.
Yeah, he just makes the contact, just put it in play. Right?
He was not going to get jammed. The other thing, I mean, I was listening to Chipper Jones talk the other day, and it's funny how, you know, I mean, he hasn't been out of the game that long, but with a lot of the new stuff getting so in depth. But he said something the other day. He said, "What's the most important 3 inches?" You know, when you're in the plate, and everybody starts talking about the plate. He says, "It's the bat. It's the 3 inches on the sweet spot of the bat. You have to know where that is at all times." And a lot of guys are so focused on the ball out there and everything else, but you have to connect that 3 inches with that baseball.
Yeah.
And that's probably as eloquently as simple as you can do it. And I don't think enough young hitters really understand that I got to know where those 3 inches on the head of the bat are at all.
It's really hard to see that, you know, when you're out like this.
Yeah. No doubt.
Which we see quite a bit of. And, you know, one thing when we were with Cincinnati, we used a ball exit machine. This is way before any of this stuff was out there. This is a golf ball machine. And we were showing how vision affects ball exit speed. And guys can create – Johnny Gomes was there. And Johnny, you remember him, how strong he was. And he put a rip on it. And he had phenomenal uh, exit velocity on there. But like when the head came off, they create some whip speed, but there was the inconsistency of contact. So you'd see a lot of missed speeds. But when they were focused and they were mindful of that 3 inches like you're talking about, man, that ball was just taken off consistently and fast on there.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many loose terms out there, like, stay behind the baseball, and guys got to understand what it means to stay behind a baseball with their eyes, not luck over the top. Or I remember when we were in Kansas City, we were struggling a little bit, and we were chasing a lot of balls in the dirt. And we had Dale Swaim as our hitting coach, and he said, "Listen, we're going to just move it up about our vision up 6 inches, right?" So what's happening? They were looking at that nasty pitch down there all the time, and they're chasing balls in the dirt, and they're missing the cookie down the middle because their vision was looking too low. And once we raised it up, we started hitting more home runs. We didn't chase the balls in the dirt. So there's always tricks like that to understand.
Yeah, and what that does in quite a few different ways, but it gets them focused out of their body.
Yeah,
get them focused on what they're trying to do instead of the feel of
they set that little man up on their shoulder. He stops talking for a little bit.
Yeah, that little man gets in the way of a lot of those hitters.
Yeah, he got loud mouth.
Those position players too, pitchers as well.
Yeah.
Now, as a bench coach, you got to figure out how to get rid of that guy for those guys, don't you?
Yeah, I'll go up and I'll go like this on their shoulder. He's gone. He's gone. He can't talk to you no more.
Yeah. Now, what are some of as a bench coach? We're kind of laughing earlier. Your roles have kind of changed over the years and stuff. And besides some of these people that see you on the phone all the time, what's your role as a bench coach? What's some of the tough tasks you have?
I think the easiest way to explain it is the constraints. And I've talked to Tony La Russa and Jimmy Leland and all the old guards that I had utmost respect for. And they said, today's probably the hardest time in the history of the game to manage in the big leagues because of the media constraints. Mm-hmm. Literally, I mean, you're getting TV shows, radio shows that are calling in. Not only you have your pre and post game scrum, you're just constantly dealing with the media and not on the field as much as you'd like to or used to be. So now that was the invention of the bench coach, is that he's going to take care of those day-to-day routines. He's going to schedule the workouts. I schedule all the spring training for, anywhere from 60 to 90 guys every year, but then on the daily basis, same thing with, the advanced scouting reports have gotten to be 3 inches thick because the data is so detailed now. Well, again, because the manager has so much time, I got to make sure that I have that information on hand, whether it's matchups, whether it's, who we're going to pinch hit, who we're going to pinch, do a defensive replacement late in the game. Data like, the left-right splits on pitchers and hitters. Again, we go over a lot of this pregame just before, but I'm just the sounding board. I'm a second opinion for the manager, and I'm also the guy that watches his back. Mm-hmm. So there's something that, and I take it very serious. If we don't make a move that we should have made because he was thinking about pitching and we should have replaced somebody on defense, I take a lot of pride in being able to say, especially with Chris Woodward has played a long time in the big leagues, has been around the game, and is one of the most intelligent young men, managers I've ever been around.
I've always enjoyed Chris.
Well, he's tremendous, and he just has a thirst to get better, and he's a great motivator. And so for me, it's an honor to be kind of that sidekick to him, and I had the privilege of managing him, and so we have a great relationship. And our relationship in Seattle, I wouldn't have this job today if we didn't get along in Seattle or he didn't respect the job I did up there. So it's a two-way street, but it's a fun job. I always kid the other guys, like, I'm not a hitting coach, I'm not a pitching coach, so when that goes bad, don't look at me. So I got the best job in baseball.
You've seen it all, though.
Yeah, but I think it gives me the freedom to talk to every player. And most of my responsibility on that side is like what we've been talking about here, is more the sounding board for thoughts and mental stuff rather than I'm not going to deal with or change somebody's swing. We got guys for that, or pitching mechanics. But if we want to talk about, issues they might be having from a mental standpoint, then I'll try to sit them down and be a quasi. And we even have sports psychologists now. So, but it's a fun job. It's a great job.
Now, going back on the idea of visualization, what kind of role does visualization play in your preparation as a bench coach?
Well, visualization could be, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a form of practice, and there's visualization of, pregame where we're, again, we know exactly release height and spin efficiency, and we have so much stuff, and how much the Verlander's breaking ball breaks 24 inches, right? Vertical drop or horizontal movement. We have all that data now, which allows us to be able to close our eyes sometimes and have a clearer picture than we ever did before. I can sit there and play in my mind because of that data and say, it's going to look like the ball's going to look like it's going to come. I should be swinging here, but I got to swing here. So a lot of times you can close your eyes and now do it and take mental batting practice that way. But there's so much to it. It could be, you'll see some guys on defense close their eyes out there, and all they're doing is they're acting like, okay, this is a backhand in the hole. This is a ball to my left. This is a slow hopper. They'll play it and then they'll go. So there's so much of that going on in our game.
Even going back to Barry Bonds, Barry was a huge visualizer, and a lot of people gave him a hard time about his locker room antics with his chair, but more times than not, he was there visualizing and seeing himself be greater than great.
No, he was sleeping.
Sleeping and dreaming.
Yeah.
Going back to your staff at Texas, it's kind of cool for me because we had Calix on one of our early shows on here, and I got to know Calix with Toronto, and I got to know Chris with Atlanta. Actually, was the first time I believe I got to know Chris, and then Toronto as well, and over the time, and you got Hector Ortiz there, and Hector is actually one of the reasons why I do what I do. And the reason was the first year I went with my dad to spring training, and we were with a few different teams, and the Royals were at the time Sweeney and a bunch of great Beltran there and stuff. And, I'm just kind of learning, I never listened to my dad, and he's teaching me, showing things. And so I'm just saying, whatever, Dad, you're crazy, you're weird, and come back the next year. Well, I heard Beltran that year, but come back the next year, and Ortiz comes up to me and goes, "Oh my God, I hit so good. This is the best year I've ever had. You helped me so much." I'm like, huh? And it was really about training his depth perception, and getting having a visual plan. And that's what really sold me on working with my dad, was seeing the impact of those players and how that they took it to another level. And so it's been fun over those 20 years, and obviously with you and with the Angels and you in Toronto. And hopefully some stuff in Texas too.
Well, Calix played for me in Seattle too, and he reminds me every day that I never gave him an opportunity to release.
I could see him doing that. Yeah. But definitely a fun time. Now, any other thoughts or suggestions you have out there for coaches or kids or anything in this time?
No, like I said before, be really good at time management. Set a schedule. Even now, when you're not in school, what's your day going to look like? Because it's going to go by before you know it. Be able to have some kind of goals on a daily basis. The other thing is, learn. Educate yourself. Read stories. Read books on great players. Read on things that fascinate you. It'll keep your attention. But there's no greater power than education,
Yeah.
And then the last thing is like I was saying with like the David Goggins, you got to believe that you can be the best player out there no matter what. And so we mentioned it. One of the first things was the ability to process negativity. That's easier said than done. But when you understand the game, and the old slogan is, you're going to fail 70% of the time to be a Hall of Famer. So these guys have short memories. Closers in the game have short memories. The great players have short memories, so.
That was Phil Mickelson the other day. He's talking about I replay a bad shot and then it's over with. I'm on to the next shot,
Yeah, it's a simple game. Train as hard as you possibly can, and divide your ego from you as a person. And what I mean by that is you aren't your performance, right? Like I see guys that don't sleep at night. I see guys that have bad habits because the pressure gets to them so much. And when the good ones start understanding that God gave them ability, right? And if the training and the prep and the routines are there, that's all they can ask of themselves. So they're not process oriented. I mean, they're not result oriented. They're more process oriented. If I do this, I've given myself the best possible chance to win. If I win, great. If I don't, sometimes it's not my control, but it's not because I'm a bad person, And maybe the other thing that I think is really understand why you play the game, and there's a lot of reasons. I've had players all through the spectrum play for different reasons. Some is money, some is fame, some is for respect to your peers, some is for the respect or not to let your parents down, right? You have to process that and understand, why are you doing this? Why are you playing this game? Why do you want to play this game? Hopefully it is for the love of the game. But the other ones, you got to say, is that really the right thing that I should be focusing on to motivate me, right? And that's just time to reflect. The last thing I'll leave on that subject is, what phones have done to us now, in a sense, and everybody hears it, right? But I'll walk into a major league clubhouse and I got 25 guys on a phone, texting each other 2 feet away. But the psychologists, the experts of the world will tell you that we're constantly in this mode of watching a movie. We're just watching a movie on this phone, and we're not reflecting. So in athletics, if you really understand athletics, there's got to be a time where you execute, you reflect, make an adjustment, and then execute again. And we're really getting to this point where we don't reflect anymore. We don't look at that situation of what just happened and take time to process it. We just want to get back on the horse. We all do it as amateur golfers. We shank one. We can't put that ball fast enough down there and hit it again. And we shank it again. We're looking at a 9 before we can blink. So that's the other thing with really trying to evaluate yourself from a standpoint. You can't do that unless you take time to reflect on your performance.
Yeah, one of my dad's methodologies and what you're talking about there is, and I won't use the whole term here, but the first step in that is analyze the situation. Don't analyze the situation, but just analyze it.
Yeah.
And then visualize how you're going to go about doing it properly. And you can, play one, what did I do wrong? And then picture, okay, 10 times how you're going to do that the next time correctly. Then you center on the task at hand, not the goals, but the task. And then you execute. Let it happen. You don't force it to happen. And then you do an after action review.
Yeah.
And another way of saying that is what they call the OODA loop in the military, and it's observe, orient, decide, and act. And that loop's constantly going. And when you can learn to process that way, I think it obviously it's not going to guarantee success, but it puts you in the right pathway to get there.
Yeah. Well, I think players got to understand that, from little league to the big leagues, there's two components to moving up. And number one is consistency in action. Number two is the speed of the game, right? And those are things that if you stop and think about that and reflect and say, well, where am I at on that spectrum? And that's when you watch great players play, they're consistent and the game's extremely slow to them.
That's my plug-in for vision right there. Visual consistency.
Yeah, exactly.
And slowing it down with your eyes.
Yeah.
Be able to do it.
Yeah.
And when the game speeds up, and that's what everyone talks about, and you see this is when they struggle, the game speeds up. They think too much and they try too hard. And when things slow down and when they see the ball really well, that's where good things happen. And that's what the greats can do, is learn how to slow it down when they need to.
Yeah. more is not always better. Less is sometimes a little bit better. And I remember, I'll tell you a quick story. When I first got an opportunity to manage, to fill in for Buck Showalter, he got kicked out of a game. Actually, it was 4 games in Detroit. And I would run the minor league system, but I was still pretty young as far as being a big league coach. And we go into Detroit, and Detroit's in first place, and Jimmy Leland's the manager who I respected. And so I was really intimidated having to manage these 4 games, right? So I'm sitting in the dugout acting like, a macho manager over there, but I'm scared. I'm paralyzed. I can't move. I can't breathe, for 4 days, right? And we end up winning 3 out of the 4. And I mean, I didn't know what to do. I was just a wooden Indian over there.
Got lucky.
Yeah, we won 3 out of 4. And I remember Mikey Young and Hank Blaylock and Teixeira and all these guys coming up to me, and they go, "Dude, you were awesome." So sometimes it's not always trying to get too involved.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Don't make it complicated.
I do have a question by someone. I don't know if you can answer this or not, but a 14-year-old is interested in sabermetrics for baseball. Do you have any advice on where to get data, how to start getting involved with the college or low minor league team, and to what extent do they use stats in the minor leagues and majors?
That's such a broad. That's such a broad question. I mean, I was with Billy Beane in Oakland not when before they did the movie, but after they did the movie, and I was a part of that I guess that think tank over there a little bit, and so that the sabermetrics really came in to put a price value on a player. If you think about that, when I wanted to go to understand the value of my player or a player I was going to acquire, I had to put some analytical data on that to give them a value, right? Now, that's how it started, really. So if I didn't see a player play, I didn't have the luxury of watching video, but I had his stats. I can somehow break that down and try to project what type of player he was. Now we're getting into a whole different ball game on in-game metrics. And that's spin rate, that's launch angle, that's defensive positioning, all that stuff. Is some of it complicated? It all goes back to what I said before. There's enough on the internet. You can type in sabermetrics and start learning some of the phrase, whether it's WOBA, ex-WOBA, they come up with new ones every day, right?
Yeah, I saw a new one the other day. I don't remember what it was.
Well, I remember somebody said, the Yankees signed Raul Ibanez because his exit velocity hadn't gone down from age 34 to age 36, right? Which is valid. Or, we in Kansas City, we went and signed Chris Young, 6'10", Chris Young, because he had an extreme high infield pop rate. So it's just depending on what flavor of the day that you want or how it applies to you. But
yeah, how you manipulate the data for your wants.
Yeah, but so as I said before, the game is segmented. There's a time and there's enough books out there, and there's enough stuff on sabermetrics that I don't need to get into it. Guys can get that information, right? And then we're talking about the cage work, or the downtime where we're working on swing changes or pitch design. But it goes back to the other side of competing in a game. And what does that mean? Competing in the game is like not having thought, right? Non-thought. It's like I equate it to opening a doorknob. When was the last time where you said, okay, I'm going to take my right hand out, I'm going to grab the knob, I'm going to turn it and pull it and then walk through? You don't do that. You just walk through the door. The great ones walk through the door, but they do it because of that prep and that understanding of those sabermetric stuff that that we're talking about. So those are evaluation tools to know what you're good and bad at, right? I can tell you exactly, what a guy hits, on the third Sunday of the month, on a lunar moon, on half grass, half turf after he ate chicken for lunch. It's crazy. So the evaluation tools are we can break those down to kind of give us areas of focus to work on. So, but I guess going back to that is, you know, read as much as you can about it, try to educate yourself on the lingo and the understanding of how it applies.
Now, Mark Doran commented, by the way.
Door. Yeah.
Dorney wants to know if he was the hardest working player.
He run through a wall. I know that. I don't know if that was smart, if that was grit or lack of intelligence.
Yeah, well
he worked hard, man. We had a great.
Still listening. It's obviously affected him running into that wall over time.
Yeah, we go way back.
Yeah.
We see each other about every 5 years or so out in Chicago. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, Wak, I appreciate you, you know, coming on and saying some great words and stuff, and appreciate it. And, you know, obviously in this time, you know, we're trying to get some good content out there for people and putting a little vision twist to some of this stuff. But I think even some of the other information, you know, hopefully inspire a player or a coach and or a parent, you know, just look at the game a little differently. And you know, it's a great game, and, you know, it's unfortunate we're in the situation we are today, but, you know, there's more to it than just swing, and there's more to it than just the, you know, the analysis of all the data today. But, you know, there's the mental side of this game, there's the visual side of this game, and getting really good at all, you know, aspects of the game is a great opportunity for players in this time of downtime on there.
Yeah, you know, I think the last thing I'll say before we go is, you know, we're in a business of developing men first, right? It's very critical. Brian Butterfield is one of my all-time favorite coaches, right? We've been together with the Diamondbacks in Toronto, and arguably one of the best baseball coaches in the history of the game, in my opinion. That good. And the reason he's good is I remember going into spring training, and we'd have 100 players, or maybe not that many, but probably at least 70 players in Major League camp. And over the winter, he'll have studied exactly where they're from, their hometown, what college they went to, what mascot was either their high school or their college. But he did his homework on every single player, so he had a common thread when they said hello. He knew a little background on them, right? And so you remember those things, and that's why players love him so much. That's why he's been so successful in baseball. And so those are things with coaches. If there are any coaches out there, take the time to know the background of your players, understand where they come from, how they think, you know, and build better men first.
Awesome. Well, you know, it's funny. You keep bringing up all these names of people that I cross paths with, and we've had a few of them as guests, and even did you have Howie Clark too?
Oh yeah. Oh
yeah. Howie was on here. I got Jeremy Jambi coming on next week. Were you there with Oakland and Jeremy?
No, we missed each other, but, you know, obviously a tremendous player and a person. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been fun to you know, talk shop, and tomorrow we have former European Senior Masters champion Ray Carrasco, who's been a family friend as well.
Yeah.
So we got some cool shows coming up, and, you know, again, I want to thank Max BP, because they sponsor and they get the word out there for our show on there, and NDV, and obviously we got a bunch of Ranger fans that are going to be coming out there and getting you and Calix, and, you know, making sure you guys are doing your job this upcoming year. But I guess we're going to be doing it from the couch probably more than on the field.
I'm gonna